is only the beginning, and I said that in my opening comments. In the report, we dealt with the treatment of Israeli hostages during the course of their abduction and taking to Gaza. We could not at that stage look beyond that. But in future reports, hopefully when we report to the General Assembly, but it will depend on how much information we have, we will be dealing with the treatment of all hostages, detainees, prisoners, both by the de facto authorities in Gaza and by the Israeli authorities in Israel. Not only were we unable in this report to investigate the 124 hostages in Gaza, we were unable to investigate the condition of the 8,000 to 10,000 prisoners in Israeli prisons as well. So that is very much on our agenda. But one thing I would emphasise in saying that is the importance of access to information. We cannot report if we don't have the information. There are hostages that have been released. We would like very much to talk to them when it's appropriate to do so, taking into account their physical and psychological conditions. I mean, our first rule in evidence collecting is do no harm. So at an appropriate time for them, we want to talk to them. We want to find out what happened. And that's going to require the cooperation of the Israeli government. And if we can't do it adequately, it will be because we have been obstructed in our capacity to collect evidence. So we want to do it. We are collecting evidence already. We are not ready yet to report. We hope to be able to do so soon, but our ability to do so will depend upon the evidence we can collect.
Thank you. Let's take one question online. First from Laurent Sierra from the Swiss news agency. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. If I read the report correctly, you mentioned the word genocide once when you talk about the hate speeches that might incite to genocide. In future reports, do you plan to assess whether some of all of the 8 criteria for genocide are met in the current situation? Or do you precisely consider that it's a decision, as it is a decision that has to be made by the court? It's going to be only the work of ICJ and ICC. Thank you.
I think both of us would like to say something about this, yeah. You know, that's a very good question, Laurent, because as the judge on the Rwanda tribunal who delivered the world's first judgment on genocide, I tended to always say you cannot label something genocide until a court finds it so. Since then, you know, since I'm no longer sitting as a judge there, I realized that how then are you going to track events leading up to genocide, indications of genocide, plausible indications of genocide? We are now strengthened because there is the provisional order decision by the ICJ. I think that strengthens us to look in terms of genocide. Many people are concerned about this. They do consider genocide as the most serious offense, and why aren't we dealing with it? I would also say that I have some constraints in the fact that our mandate comes from the Human Rights Council, and they have not put genocide into our mandate. But as I say, I've since changed my mind. I'll work closely with our team to follow whether the elements of genocide are being shown here in this conflict.
And I'd like to answer by just referring to the investigative methodology. I mean, when you conduct an investigation like this, you don't start out by saying, I plan to deal with genocide or I plan to deal with war crimes. The starting point is the collection of facts, evidence. And then on the basis of that evidence, forming conclusions as to what occurred, and then on the basis of those conclusions, applying the relevant law and coming to a legal analysis and decision. So we don't plan to do anything in relation to that. We plan to look at issues, but if the issue of genocide is an issue that needs to be addressed because of the facts that we find, then we'll have to consider whether we do it or not. And I put that last qualification on it because it is before the court at the moment, and we're also quite conscious of the fact that only 3 months ago, the Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Palestinian Territories, in her annual report, dealt extensively with the issue of genocide. And when there are more issues than we can possibly deal with arising from what has happened over the last 8 months, there's not much point in us delving intensively into questions that other UN independent mechanisms have looked at. We have not dealt with so many issues yet. So my answer would be, we don't plan that way. We will collect evidence. We will make factual findings. We will decide what the applicable law is to be considered in the context of them. And if that takes us to genocide and the discussion of genocide, then we'll discuss it.
Thank you. All right, let's take a question from the back of the room. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Musa Asi, Al Mayadeen TV. I have a question about the role of third parties in this tragedy. The parties that supply Israel with the weapons, like the big bombs, 2,000 pounds. The Commission spoke about that this morning. How you see this role? There's something mentioned in your report about that? Thank you.
We have included that in our first report to the General Assembly, that was October 23, where we identified as the root cause of the conflict. That's part of our mandate, identify what's the root cause of the mandate. And we, just based on all the evidence we gathered,